Welcome again to Math 800 Pre-Algebra. Today we are doing section 4.3, Multiplying and Dividing Signed Fractions. Our objectives: 1. To multiply signed fractions. 2. To multiply fractions that involve variables. 3. To divide signed fractions. 4. To divide fractions that involve variables. And lastly 5. To solve application problems involving multiplying and dividing fractions. To multiply fractions, such as a over b times c over d, all you do is multiply top with top, or numerator with numerator, and denominator with denominator, bottom with bottom. So a over b times c over d is just a times c over b times d. That's it. It's just that easy. What gets complicated is that our final result has to be simplified, and it's the simplifying where most students have difficulties. For example, find the product of negative 5/8 times negative 3/4. We're going to multiply these together. We just take the numerator times the numerator, 5 times 3, and the denominator times the denominator, 8 times 4. Notice that the answer is positive. That's because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then you just multiply. 5 times 3 is 15, 8 times 4 is 32. That is in lowest terms, so that is our answer. Again, the most difficult part is simplifying. In this case, it was in lowest terms, so all you do is 5 times 3 and 8 times 4. Here's another example. Find the product of negative 8/5 times 5/12. If we just multiply across, we have 8 times 5 is 40, and 5 times 12 is 60, and we have a negative times a positive, so our answer is negative. This is technically correct and finished as far as the multiplying goes. However, our answer has to be in lowest terms, and we must simplify this. In this case, 40 over 60 is fairly simple to simplify if you just factor out or divide out common factors. For example, I know I can divide 40 and 60 by 10. That gives me negative 4/6. And then I can see that I can divide both 4 and 6 by 2, and I get negative 2/3. However, many times the number you get when you multiply will be very big, and in fact will be numbers that you will not be able to look at and know immediately, oh, I can divide it by this, or I can divide it by that. So it is often very helpful to do it with prime factorization. And it's easier to find the prime factorizations of these smaller numbers than to try to find the prime factors of the numbers once you've multiplied. So instead of multiplying them together to start with, I'm going to jump to the end and the simplifying step and say, okay, to simplify, I will need prime factorization. So let's rewrite these in their prime factors. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2, 5 is prime, again 5 is prime, and 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. Then cancel out common factors, because 2 divided by 2 is 1, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. This leaves us with a negative 2/3. Notice how the negative sign just came along the entire while. Be very careful that you don't drop it. It might be helpful to bring a highlighter and highlight negative symbols so you don't lose them. And then 2/3 is our final answer. Notice we get the same final answer. I don't care which method you use, but you must show me your work. So you either need to show me what you're dividing out of both top and bottom, or you have to show me the prime factorization. I should also note that some students kind of combine the two approaches, and instead of breaking it down all the way to prime factors, they may have written 8 as 2 times 4, and 12 as 3 times 4, and then simply canceled out the 4's. That is also acceptable. The most important thing to me is that you show me that you're doing the same thing to top and bottom. Another example. Find 2/3 of 6. When you see 2/3 of something or any fraction of something, the of means multiplication. 6 can be rewritten as a fraction of 6 over 1. Any whole number or any letter or basically anything at all can be written as a fraction by putting it over 1. That's because 6 divided by 1 is 6. We will use this idea a lot. So 2/3 of 6 is the same as 2/3 times 6 over 1. Again, you could just multiply. 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 1 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Or you can use the prime factorization. 6 is 2 times 3, cancel out the 3's, you get 4 over 1, which is 4. Again, I don't care which method you use. Had you done 2 times 6 divided by 3, it's very obvious that 12 divided by 3 is 4. Find the product. 3x over 5 times 2 over 9x. We're going to use our prime factors. 3x means 3 times x. 2 is prime, 5 is prime. 9x is 3 times 3 times x. Recall 9 is 3 times 3, and x is our x. Cancel out our common factors of 3 and x, and we're left with 2 over 15. Find the product, 3y over 4x times 2x squared over y. Again, we're going to break them down. 3y is just 3 times y. 2x squared is 2 times x. 4x, well, 4 is 2 times 2, and then we have our x, and then we have that single y. We have lots of common factors. We have a set of y's, a set of 2's, and a set of x's. This leaves us with 3 times x over 2. That's your final simplified answer. Had you written this as 6x squared y over 4xy, that would have been okay, but you're not done yet. It's not wrong, it's simply not done. It's like you drove to your house, got all the way to your driveway, and then just stopped and never got out of your car. Simplifying is that final step of actually getting out of your car and going into your house. To divide, we're going to need to use reciprocals. The reciprocal of a number is one such that you multiply it and it equals 1. For example, a over b and b over a are reciprocals because a times b cancels out with b times a and leaves us with 1. The shortcut to find a reciprocal is simply to flip the top and the bottom. A goes to the denominator, b goes to the numerator. Here are some examples. The number is 1/6. The reciprocal will be 6 over 1. You can think of that as just a regular 6. The reason is because 1/6 times 6 over 1 is 6 over 6, which equals 1. If our number is 2/5, the reciprocal will be negative 5/2. Notice the negative is not affected by the reciprocal. If you are thinking opposite reciprocal, you're thinking about slope, and that's something completely different. We are just changing the numerator and the denominator. If we multiply these together, negative 2/5 times negative 5/2, then negative times a negative becomes a positive. 2 times 5 is 10, 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 over 10 is 1. For 4, think of it as 4 over 1. Then when you flip the numerator and denominator, you get 1/4. And again, 4 times 1/4 would be 4 over 1 times 1 over 4, which is 4 over 4, which equals 1. A quick note, every number has a reciprocal except for 0. That's because a reciprocal is something that you could multiply in order to get 1. But it doesn't matter what you put here, 0 times anything can never equal 1. Therefore, 0 can never have a reciprocal. In order to divide fractions, you multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second fraction. I will have a separate video detailing why this works. It's a very long and somewhat complicated explanation, and most students do not find it helpful. However, if you're someone who is just dying to know why we do this, please see the extra video on why multiplying by the reciprocal is how we do division. At the end of the day, you just need to have this memorized. Quick note, the division sign must turn into a multiplication sign. If you do not change the symbol, you will lose points. So the division becomes a multiplication, and you take the reciprocal of the second fraction. Notice the first fraction does not change. Our example, divide 3/10 divided by 4/5. We are going to rewrite 4/5 with its reciprocal 5/4 and rewrite the division as a multiplication. Notice the 3/10 did not change. You could just multiply across. You'd have 15 over 40, but we want to simplify, so instead we will break this down, and we get 3/8 as our final answer. 2 divided by negative 1/3. Think of 2 as 2 over 1. The division turns into a multiplication, and we take the reciprocal, which is 3 over 1. We have a positive times a negative, so our answer will be negative, and we have 2 times 3 over 1 times 1. Nothing cancels, and we simply get negative 6 over 1, which is the same as negative 6. Negative 3/4 divided by negative 8. Again, negative 8 can be thought of as 8 over 1. Therefore, the reciprocal is 1/8. The division becomes a multiplication. We get 3 times 1 over 4 times 8. Notice a negative times a negative became a positive, and we get 3 over 32. A quick note. When we were simplifying fractions, I made a big deal about the fact that you cannot write it as just a single divided by negative 8. You had to have one in the top and one in the bottom. This right here is why. When you say divide by just a single number, what you're doing is multiplying by its reciprocal, and that gets you a completely different number. It is not simplifying. It's very important then when you're simplifying to have it on the top and the bottom. If you're just dividing by a number, that's a completely different process. Divide 9/16 by 0. 9/16 divided by 0. We cannot divide by 0. Whether that's a fraction, decimal, whole number, positive, negative, doesn't matter. You can't divide by 0. We say that dividing by 0 is undefined. 0 divided by 9/16. This is fine. This is 0 times the reciprocal 16/9, but 0 times anything is simply 0. Divide x squared over y by x over 3y. Again, we're going to rewrite as multiplication times the reciprocal of the second one. Again, the first one doesn't change, it's just the second one. Write in factored form, x times 3 times y over y times x. An x pair and a y pair cancels out and leaves you with 3x over 1. Anything over 1 is simply the number on top, 3x. Divide 8b over 5 by b squared. Remember, b squared you can think of as being over 1, so the reciprocal just flips it and you get 1 over b squared. Then write in factored form and you get 8 over 5b. Our last objective, solve application problems involving multiplying and dividing fractions. We have a few key words. Indicator words for multiplication are product, double, triple, times, twice, or of. Generally speaking, we'll see of most often. But be careful, sometimes of is there for other reasons. So generally if you see a fraction followed by of, that's when they're talking about multiplication. Most of our problems are going to involve that word. Indicator words for division are per, each, goes into, divided by, divided into, divided equally. We are going to use per and each. Those are the ones you're going to see most frequently. Example. Lois gives 1/10 of her income to her church. Last month she earned $1,980. How much of that did she give to her church? There is that key word of, 1/10 of her income. Her income was $1,980, so we want 1/10 of the $1,980. That means 1/10 times $1,980. Recall that you can turn any number into a fraction by putting it over 1. Now you could have just multiplied and had 1980 over 10, and that divides quite easily into 198. Or you can break it down and think 198 times 10 and 10 times 1. Cross out the 10s and you get 198 over 1, or 198. It is a word problem, so you are not done. You need to state your answer with units. The easiest way to remember that is to put it in a sentence. Lois gave $198 to her church. Our final example. The apparel design class is making infant snowsuits to give to a local shelter. A fabric store donated a 12-yard length of fabric for the project. If one snowsuit needs 2/3 yards of fabric, how many suits can the class make? In this case, it might be nice to draw a diagram. Here are your 12 yards of fabric. You need to cut out 2/3 yards for each snowsuit. So you would do 2/3 yard, cut another 2/3, cut another 2/3, cut another 2/3. You're asking yourself, how many 2/3 are in 12? When you're asking that question, how many 2/3 are in 12, you are dividing. You're doing 12 divided by 2/3. This is a very tricky situation, and you're going to see lots of word problems like this. So when you have a total amount, and you're trying to find a smaller subset that is equal, you are dividing the total by the size of the subset. Remember, 12 is 12 over 1. To divide, you multiply by the reciprocal. You could just multiply this across. You'd have 36 over 2, and then divide. Or you can break it down. Notice they're starting to use our hybrid method. They didn't go all the way down to prime factors. Instead, they just broke 12 down into 2 times 6. Cancel out the 2's, and you get 18 over 1, or 18. The class can make 18 snowsuits. That concludes our video for section 4.3. Now you should complete the worksheet for section 4.3, check the key or come to class, then complete the online homework for section 4.3, and lastly start on section 4.4. Again, I will have an extra video detailing why it is that we divide fractions by multiplying by the reciprocal, but you are not required to watch this.